All right, everybody, welcome back for our deep dive today.
Where we're going to be talking about learning English effectively.
And to help us on our journey, we've got a great source this week from one of our listeners.
Absolutely.
Who sent in, it looks like, some sort of step-by-step process for how to go about,
learning English as a second language.
Yeah.
And I thought...
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting deep dive because,
they've clearly put some thought into this.
Yeah.
And
it seems like they've got a good...
They've outlined like 10 distinct steps. So it'll be cool to sort of like break those down.
Think about how people can actually put them into practice.
Yeah, it's not just sort of like a random assortment of things. This is like...
If you're going to learn English,
Sure.
these are steps,
Right.
that you need to be thinking about. So I'm excited to kind of like dig into this a little bit more deeply with you.
Let's do it. Where should we start?
Well, I thought maybe a good place to start would be with,
You've got to figure out where you are before you figure out where you're going.
Okay, so assessment.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Kind of like, what's your level?
What are your goals? And the listener here, they kind of touch on this. What did you think about that section?
So they were talking about SMART goals, right?
Right.
And I think that's crucial for anything, not just language learning.
Right.
Like, let's say you're really into photography, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just having a vague idea of like, oh, I want to take better pictures, that's not going to get you very far.
Right.
But if you say, okay, this month I'm going to learn how to use aperture priority mode on my camera.
Right.
And I'm going to take, at least 10 pictures a day, practicing that. Boom. Specific, measurable.
There you go.
Achievable, relevant,
Right.
time-bound, smart.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm all about taking something that seems kind of vague
And then breaking it down into like really
actionable steps. And they do a decent job of that, I think, in this. Like some of their
life is maybe a little bit rigid for me. Like they have a whole
Yeah, I saw that schedule like whoa.
I know. It's like, whoa, who has time for
Who's living their life like that?
Right. Like I'm barely getting dressed in the morning. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you. But I think the core idea there is solid. Like you don't need to follow it to the letter.
Right.
But finding ways to make English part of your everyday life.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's where it's at.
That's where the magic happens.
And that actually reminds me, I think in another section they were talking about how, don't just like memorize lists of vocabulary words.
Like context is key.
Yeah, context is key.
Yeah.
Learn them in context and like use them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I always tell my students is like watch movies.
Yes.
Watch movies with the subtitles on, obviously in English.
Yeah.
But then, like, as you start to get better, challenge yourself. Watch it again without the subtitles.
Oh, I love that.
And you can
because you pick up on so much more.
You do.
When you're not just like reading it at the bottom. You know what I mean?
And it's fun. Like you were saying, right? It turns it into a game.
It does. It's like, oh, can I understand what they're saying without looking at the subtitles?
Exactly.
And then, because sometimes you misunderstand.
How about it?
Oh my gosh.
Some of my favorite, movie moments
are like complete misunderstandings of subtitles.
Oh, really?
Like, oh, they definitely did not say that.
That's hilarious.
But, okay. So we've got assessment. We've got making it a habit.
We've got vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
They also talk about this thing that I think is so important. But so many people, I think, are
afraid to do it.
And that is like actually talking to native speakers.
Native speakers. It's scary. It's scary. Like, I remember when I was first learning, like, Spanish.
I was so scared to, like, make a mistake.
Right.
But you know what? Everyone's been there.
Of course. Every native speaker was once a learner.
Exactly.
And like, think about it this way. If someone is learning your native language.
And they come up to you, they try to speak, like, you're not going to be like.
No, you're going to be excited.
You're going to be like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You're going to want to help them.
Exactly.
So don't be afraid to just put yourself out there.
Right.
And honestly, like, there are so many resources now online.
Oh, no.
Like language exchange platforms,
Yeah.
You can totally find someone.
Find a buddy. Find a
buddy, exactly, and practice, whatever you've been working on.
That's how I met one of my closest friends, actually. It was through a language exchange.
That's amazing.
Years and years ago. So
that's so cool.
It really does work. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of really practical things. how do we keep the momentum going? Because learning a language...
It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, right?
It is. It is. And you've got to stay motivated. You know, like you were saying earlier, celebrate those small victories.
Yes.
Like, did you finish a whole episode of a podcast in English? Awesome. Like, treat yourself, right?
I love it. Reward yourself.
But also, I think, find what you're passionate about and do it in English. Like, do you love to read? Join an online book club in English.
Are you obsessed with like stand-up comedy? Follow some English-speaking comedians on social media.
Okay, that's such a good idea because it doesn't feel like work then. Yeah. You're like, I'm just doing something I enjoy, but I'm also
immersing myself in the language.
Exactly. Surround yourself with the language.
Make it fun. Yeah. Make it relevant to your life.
Make it fun.
And then it's not just learning, it's living.
I love it. I love it. So we've talked about a lot of stuff, but I think the listener has given us some really, really great points to think about.
They have. Yeah.
And I love, like, I don't know, I feel like they've given us almost like a roadmap.
A roadmap, yeah.
For how to
really effectively learn English.
Yeah.
So I hope that our listeners out there
are finding this helpful.
I hope so too.
And that they're as excited to put these things into practice
as we are.
And you know what? While they're out there putting it into practice.
Here's a thought to kind of like ponder.
Yes, go ahead.
How can you turn your learning environment into a mini English-speaking world? Like, what would that look like?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
You know, because if you
can make it a part of your world, it becomes less like this, chore.
Right.
And it's just like, part of your life.
I love that. I love that. Okay, listeners, you heard it here first. Go forth and
make your world an English-speaking world.
There you go.
We'll see you next time
for another deep dive.
See you then.